In 1966, a Soviet engineer named Mikhail Tyorekhin built a machine that predicted road accidents. Not a machine that analyzed risk factors or calculated probability distributions across traffic patterns. A machine that named specific accidents, location, time, vehicles involved, 11 minutes before they happened. Its accuracy in the first 6 months of operation, 94%. Tyorekhin was satisfied. The machine was doing what he had designed it to do. Then he started looking at the accidents the machine had not predicted. I found this program through a technical registry survey I was conducting for an institutional inventory of Soviet-applied cybernetics programs. Crossroad, Probabilistic, appeared as an anomalous classification, a road safety program with a security clearance substantially above the level appropriate for transportation infrastructure. The access tier required a separate clearance request. The clearance was granted. The file was waiting. Nothing personal. A classification level that did not fit its stated category. Inconsistent classification levels are what archivists investigate. The Crossroad program was established in January 1966 under the joint authority of the Ministry of Transportation and a scientific oversight division whose affiliation the founding documents describe only by a numbering designation. The stated objective was the development of predictive systems for traffic accident prevention in Soviet urban centers, with the Leningrad pilot zone as the test environment. The framing was practical. Soviet traffic fatality rates in the mid-1960s were a genuine administrative problem, and cybernetic approaches to traffic management were a legitimate area of scientific interest in the period. The program was not implausible as a transportation safety initiative. Its classification level was. Tyorekhin was 39 years old, a systems engineer with a background in control theory and feedback mechanisms. He had no prior work in traffic systems. He was recruited specifically for this program, which suggests that whoever designed the program knew what kind of engineer they needed, and that the need was more specific than general traffic safety competence. His personal notes on the recruitment process, filed in his intake documentation, describe being interviewed about his work on prediction systems for industrial process control, systems that used early state indicators to anticipate failure events before they reached critical threshold. That work, transposed to traffic systems, was a theoretical basis for the Crossroad machine. The machine itself was, by the technical documentation, an elaborate feedback system. Sensors at key intersections feeding data into a central processing unit that identified pre-accident configurations. The specific combinations of vehicle position, speed, trajectory, and driver behavior that, in Tyorekhin's model, preceded collisions with high statistical reliability. 11 minutes was the predictive window, the time between the machine's identification of a pre-accident configuration and the predicted collision event. Long enough, in theory, to allow intervention, traffic signal adjustments, alert to nearby patrol units, dynamic routing suggestions. The machine worked. The documentation from the first 6 months shows a 94% match rate between the machine's predictions and documented accidents. The remaining 6%, the predictions that did not correspond to accidents, Tyorekhin initially classified as false positives, the expected noise in any predictive system. He continued the classification for several months. Then he checked the false positives more carefully. In those days, the Soviet state monitored everything. Every phone call, every letter, every movement through the city was tracked and recorded. Today, you have a choice. NordVPN encrypts your internet traffic and hides your identity from anyone trying to watch what you do online. If you want to protect your privacy, check the link in the pinned comment for an exclusive deal. His engineering journal from November 1966, 10 months into the program, is the document where the program's actual nature becomes visible. He wrote in his journal,
I have been auditing the false positive record for the past 3 weeks, and I want to document what I have found because it is changing how I understand the machine's performance. The machine has made 47 predictions in 10 months that did not correspond to documented accidents. I have been treating these as prediction errors, cases where the pre-accident configuration identified by the machine did not, for some reason, develop into the predicted accident. Standard noise in a predictive system. What I have been doing in this audit is examining what happened at each of these 47 locations and times in more detail than the standard accident log provides. In 39 of the 47 cases, I can now establish that there was no accident. Not that the accident was minor and not logged, that there was no collision event at all. In a further 6 cases, the evidence is ambiguous. There may have been a minor contact not formally reported. In 2 cases, I cannot establish what happened. What I cannot explain is why 39 locations and times that the machine identified as having pre-accident configurations did not develop into accidents. These were real configurations. The sensor data confirms the vehicle positions and trajectories that my model identifies as high risk. The model is correct about the risk. The accidents did not happen. I have been assuming the model's error rate is 6%. I am now wondering whether the model has an error rate at all, or whether what I have been calling errors are something else that I have not yet named.
Something he had not yet named. He named it 2 months later, and the naming required a phone call. Before the call, in December 1966, his journal contains one more entry that I want to read to you, because it is the record of a precise mind arriving at a conclusion it does not want, and accepting it anyway.
I have been thinking about what the machine does in the 6% cases with the following framework. Suppose the machine is correct. Suppose there are genuinely no prediction errors. That every configuration the machine identifies as pre-accident is in fact a pre-accident configuration. And the question is not whether it is right, but what happens to the configurations where no accident follows. The configurations where no accident follows are the ones I call false positives. But if the machine has no error rate, they are not false positives. They are true positives for which the outcome changed between prediction and event. The outcome changed. I need to think very carefully about what can cause an outcome to change after a pre-accident configuration is established. There are mechanisms I understand. Traffic signal adjustment, patrol unit dispatch, a driver noticing something in time. These are the interventions I designed the program to enable. I can account for some of the non-accident outcomes this way. I cannot account for all of them, because the interventions were not dispatched for all of them. The ones I cannot account for, the 39 I have now confirmed, are pre-accident configurations that resolved without accident and without any intervention, I can identify. I have been avoiding the next sentence for 3 weeks. The next sentence is, if there was no external intervention and the configuration changed, then something changed it from inside the configuration. Something in the system of vehicles and drivers and road conditions adjusted in a way that prevented the accident. I don't know what caused the adjustment. I don't know if the adjustment was caused by anything I can identify. I know the adjustment happened. I know the timing correlates with the machine's prediction window. I'm going to call Varenkov tomorrow.
The call is logged in the program's administrative records as a priority communication to the program's scientific director, Dr. Nikolai Varenkov, on January 14, 1967. The call was monitored as standard procedure for researchers at Tyorekhin's classification level. The intercept transcript is in the file.
I need to discuss the false positive data. I have completed the audit and I have found something that requires a conversation I cannot have in the standard reporting channel. Go ahead. The 47 predictions I have been classifying as false positives. I have established that 39 of them correspond to accidents that did not occur. Not accidents that the machine predicted incorrectly. Accidents that the prediction appears to have prevented. I have been cross-referencing the sensor data against the traffic flow records, and I have found that in 32 of the 39 cases, the pre-accident configuration that the machine identified resolved differently than the model predicts. The vehicles in the high-risk configuration changed their behavior. One slowed, one changed lane, something shifted in a way that prevented the collision. The timing of these behavioral changes is not random. They cluster in the window between the machine's prediction and the predicted event time. You are saying the prediction changed the outcome. I am saying the prediction is associated with changes that prevent the outcome. I cannot explain the mechanism. The machine does not intervene directly in these cases. The predictions I'm talking about are the ones where no intervention was dispatched. Nobody adjusted the signals. Nobody sent a patrol unit. The prediction was generated, logged internally, and not acted on. And the accidents did not happen anyway. I have been running this program for a year, and I built it as a prediction system. I think I may have built something else. How certain are you of this? The correlation is above 90% for the non-intervention predictions. I am a systems engineer. I know what a 90% correlation means. I need you to stop discussing this outside this channel. File nothing in the standard registry. Continue operating the machine. I understand. I want to note for this conversation's record that I'm not certain whether what I have built is a prediction system that inadvertently prevents accidents, or whether it is a prevention system that operates through some mechanism I don't understand, and the predictions are a side effect. The distinction matters. Continue operating the machine.
The distinction matters. Tyorekhin understood the distinction, that a machine which predicts accidents and a machine which prevents them by predicting them are two different machines, even if their external behavior looks identical, because one is a measurement device and the other is something that acts on the world. His supervisor told him to continue operating the machine. The program continued for 4 more years. Now, I need to tell you what the mathematician found. I thought the Crossroad program was a sophisticated traffic safety system that had produced unexpectedly good results. Better than expected because the prediction itself, by mechanisms the designers had not anticipated, induced behavioral changes in drivers who were unaware they were in a predicted accident configuration. A kind of observer effect applied to traffic patterns. The act of precise prediction, even without direct intervention, changing the predicted outcome through pathways the program had not been designed to use. I was wrong about what kind of system it was. I was wrong about the direction of causation. Dr. Natalia Zubkova, 44 years old, from the Institute of Applied Mathematics in Moscow, was brought into the program in its third year to conduct an independent analysis of the machine's decision architecture. Her mandate was to establish whether the machine's prediction mechanism could be formally characterized, whether the pattern recognition underlying its 94% accuracy could be expressed in mathematical terms that would allow the system to be replicated or scaled. Her analysis runs to 47 pages. The section I keep returning to is the one where her mathematics arrives at the same place Tyrekhin's engineering intuition had arrived 2 years earlier, by a different route.
I want to document a finding that the standard modeling frameworks do not accommodate because I believe the finding is real, and real findings require documentation even when, especially when, they fall outside existing frameworks. The machine's decision architecture, as I have analyzed it, does not match the description in the program's founding technical documents. The founding documents describe a pattern recognition system that identifies pre-accident configurations and generates predictions based on historical accident data. What I find when I trace the actual decision pathways is a different architecture entirely. The machine is not identifying configurations that historically precede accidents. It is identifying configurations that historically do not precede accidents, and its predictions correspond, with 94% accuracy, to the cases where the historical non-accident configuration does precede an accident anyway. The machine is not predicting likely accidents. The machine is identifying the events that fall outside the expected pattern. The accidents it predicts are the anomalies, the cases where the normal flow of traffic, which does not produce accidents, fails to hold. I cannot explain how the machine identifies these failures in advance. The sensor data available to it is insufficient by my calculations to distinguish between a normal non-accident configuration and an about-to-fail non-accident configuration 11 minutes in advance. The machine should not be able to make this distinction. It makes it with 94% accuracy. I am filing this finding and declining to speculate about its implications, because the implications are outside my discipline.
Outside her discipline. She documented it and declined to speculate. But her technical appendix, separate from the main report, and filed at a higher classification level, contains one example that her formal conclusion declines to draw from. A single event, analyzed in detail, where her mathematical tracing of the machine's decision pathway produces a result she marks as requiring verification before it can be cited. The event is a non-intervention, non-accident from February 1968, one of the cases in Tyorekhin's audit where the predicted accident did not occur and no intervention was dispatched. Zubkova traced the machine's internal decision pathway for this specific prediction, working backward from the prediction output through the processing layers to the input data. Her finding: the decision pathway for this prediction does not terminate in the sensor data. It terminates in a calculation she cannot locate in the machine's documented architecture. A step in the decision process that produces a result the documented input data is insufficient to support. She tested whether this was a documentation gap, whether a component of the machine had not been fully described in the technical records. She found no undocumented components. She found a calculation that the documented architecture should not be able to perform, producing a result that the documented inputs should not be sufficient to produce, resulting in a prediction that was correct 94% of the time across a 5-year operational period. She marked it as requiring verification and filed the appendix in the restricted subfolder. The verification was apparently never conducted, because the program ended 6 months later for reasons unknown. 2 disciplines, engineering and mathematics, arriving at the same border and stopping at it, each one documenting the observation and declining to name what lay on the other side. What lay on the other side is what the program's final report calls, in the carefully chosen language of people who have decided to be precise without being specific, selection of permitted outcomes. Here's the first contradiction. The road accident statistics for the Leningrad pilot zone between 1966 and 1971 show a 34% reduction in traffic fatalities compared to equivalent zones without the Crossroad program during the same period. This is a documented, verified reduction. The program's results, as measured by the Transportation Ministry's standard metrics, were genuine and substantial. The program worked, the roads were safer. The program's internal technical log shows a 94% prediction accuracy rate. The program's internal audit, Tyorekhin's audit, which he conducted and documented and never filed in the standard reporting channel, shows that 6% of predictions did not correspond to accidents, and that in 89% of those non-correspondences, the accident did not happen at all. The public record says traffic fatalities reduced by 34%, program successful. The internal record says the machine predicted specific accidents with 94% accuracy, and the 6% it did not predict were the accidents that disappeared from reality. 2 records of the same program producing compatible numbers and incompatible interpretations of what those numbers mean. 34% reduction in fatalities, achieved by a machine that was not preventing accidents through intervention, achieved by a machine that was apparently choosing which accidents to allow. Here's the second contradiction. The program's standard performance documentation, filed in the Transportation Ministry's registry, accessible to any administrator reviewing traffic safety programs, describes the Crossroad system as a prediction and intervention tool. Predictions logged, interventions dispatched, outcomes tracked. The documentation is internally consistent and presents a coherent picture of a working traffic safety program. The program's internal audit documentation, Tyorekhin's personal log, filed in the restricted subfolder, describes a system that had stopped being a prediction and intervention tool by the end of its first year. The non-intervention predictions, the behavioral changes in drivers who received no warning, the 39 accidents that did not happen when the machine predicted they would without sending any alert. 2 documentation streams describing the same machine in the same time period, producing incompatible accounts of what the machine was doing. One account describes a prediction system. The other describes something that selects outcomes. Here's the third contradiction. The document that should not exist. The Crossroad program's technical maintenance log, the routine record of machine calibration, component checks, and operational status, contains entries through April 30th, 1971. The program was officially concluded by administrative order on May 12th, 1971. A 12-day gap between the last maintenance entry and the official closure, which would suggest a standard wind-down. Maintenance stopped, administrative closure followed. The last entry in the maintenance log, dated April 30th, is not a standard calibration note. In Tyorekhin's handwriting, he wrote that the chief engineer of a 5-year program on the last day of maintenance operations, writing that he did not know why the program was being ended.
All systems within specified operational parameters. Sensor network functioning at full capacity. Prediction engine calibration confirmed. Archive current. I have reviewed the full operational record at the request of the Administrative Division and I confirm. The machine has no technical deficiencies. I have found no engineering basis for the program's termination. I have found no administrative basis that has been communicated to me. I am filing this final entry as I have filed every entry in this log, accurately, completely, and without omission. Machine operating normally. Reason for program termination. Unknown.
The machine was working. It was working at 94% accuracy. It was achieving a 34% reduction in the traffic fatalities. It was doing everything a successful program is supposed to do. And it was being terminated for reasons that its own engineer, writing in the maintenance log on the last day, could not identify. Tyorekhin filed no further documentation after April 30th, 1971. He continued working in the Institute of Cybernetics in Leningrad on other projects, producing papers on industrial process control that cite no work from the Crossroad period. He died in 1989. His obituary describes a distinguished career in applied systems engineering. It does not mention the Crossroad program. The Applied Cybernetics Technical Registry that led me to this file, the registry I was systematizing when the anomalous classification flag appeared, contains, 3 pages after the Crossroad entry, a record of a machine of similar construction commissioned in 1973. Different ministry, different city, different stated application. Not road safety. The stated application is listed as Operational Event Management, Priority Class. The entry continues for half a page. Technical specifications, commissioning details, responsible personnel. Then it ends mid-sentence. The following page of the registry is absent, not redacted. Absent the same way that the winch operational logs were absent. The same way that things disappear from files when someone removes them before archival rather than classifying them after. I found the missing page in the adjacent folder. Misfiled, apparently, during a previous inventory. The kind of misfiling that happens in large archives where files are handled frequently and the physical organization degrades over time. The kind of misfiling that produces a missing page in one folder and an extra page in another. The missing page describes the machine's operational mandate in terms that the Crossroad program's founders would have recognized. Not road accidents, not traffic configurations. The machine, commissioned in 1973, was designed to apply Tyorekhin's selection architecture, the architecture Zubkova had characterized as identifying which events fell outside the expected pattern to a different category of events. The category is described as adverse political developments, defined as outcomes inconsistent with planned administrative stability. The machine was selecting political outcomes, using the architecture of a road safety program, an architecture developed by an engineer who had understood, before his program was terminated, that prediction and selection were different things, applied to a domain where the distinction between prediction and selection was not a philosophical question but a political one. Where selecting which outcomes to allow meant selecting which people were arrested, which movements gained traction, which events fell inside or outside the range of what the system had decided was the expected pattern of a stable Soviet society. A machine that didn't predict the future. A machine that chose it. I want to be careful here about what I can establish and what I am inferring. What I can establish. A machine of similar construction to the Crossroad system was commissioned in 1973 and applied to political event management. The page describing its operations exists, misfiled, and I have read it. The list of events on that page is incomplete because the page ends mid-sentence. The last complete entry is a name and a date. What I am inferring, and I label it as inference, is that the list continued, that the machine operated for longer than the visible portion of the record describes, and that the outcomes it selected among were not limited to the events on the partial list I have found. The machine was selecting political outcomes, using the same architecture that had selected traffic outcomes in Leningrad between 1966 and 1971, the architecture that achieved its results not by intervening directly but by choosing, among the events that were about to fall outside the expected pattern, which ones to allow. The page ends mid-sentence. A list of events, the events the machine had been applied to, or was intended to be applied to, or had already selected among, cuts off at the bottom of the page. The last complete entry on the list, before the page ends, is a name and a date. A person's name and a date in 1974. I looked up the name. A literary dissident, known from the historical record, arrested in 1974 under circumstances that every subsequent historical analysis of the period has characterized as spontaneous and unplanned. A chance encounter with security personnel, an impulsive decision to arrest rather than surveil, an outcome that no one in the security apparatus had apparently anticipated or arranged. Spontaneous, unplanned chance. I have been sitting with that word for a week. The historical consensus on the 1974 arrest is that it was not deliberate policy, that it was the kind of thing that happens in authoritarian systems through the accumulation of small decisions no one person chose, that it was, in the fullest sense, an accident. The machine that Tyorekhin built selected, among the accidents that were about to fall outside the expected pattern, which ones to allow. In the domain of road safety, this produced a 34% reduction in fatalities. In the domain of political events, I cannot calculate what it produced because the list is incomplete and the page ends before the program's scope is fully visible. I am going to close this file. I am going to note the anomalous classification as reviewed and reconciled. I am going to refile the missing page in the correct folder, because misfiled documents belong in the correct folder. I am going to note in my administrative log that the two files should be cross-referenced. Tyorekhin wrote, on the last day of the maintenance operations, that he did not know why the program was being terminated. I believe him. The program was working. The machine was selecting which accidents to allow and which to prevent. And someone, in the spring of the 1971, decided that a machine with that capability should not be operated by an engineer who understood what it was doing. The machine commissioned in 1973 has a different engineering team listed in the registry entry. No name I can find connected to the Crossroad program. New engineers. Engineers who were given a machine whose architecture had been characterized by a mathematician as identifying which outcomes fell outside the expected pattern, and who were told what application to run it on, and who may or may not have understood, as Tyorekhin understood, the distinction between a prediction system and a selection system. The distinction matters. He said so in a phone call in January 1967, and his supervisor told him to continue operating the machine, and 4 years later the program was terminated for reasons unknown. End of Part 7. The distinction matters. I am writing it here because it matters and because I am an archivist, and writing things down is what archivists do when the things matter.